Imagine a city already battered by war, where children fall asleep to the distant echo of drones and the uncertainty of tomorrow. Now imagine in the dead of night, the last flicker of electricity vanishing as missiles strike the very heart of its power. This is not a scene from history. It happened just outside Yemen's capital, Sanaa, and the shockwaves are being felt far beyond its borders. A sudden burst of fire tore through the night sky south of Sanaa, a city already weighed down by years of conflict and deprivation. For those who watched from rooftops and narrow streets, the sight was terrifying but unmistakable. A power plant struck, flames leaping into the darkness, the hum of machines falling silent as shock spread across the capital. This was not simply another episode in Yemen's ongoing struggle, it was a statement delivered through destruction. The explosion carried a resonance beyond the boundaries of Sanaa, echoing into regional capitals, reverberating in political offices, and unsettling ordinary citizens who wondered what might come next. Moments like these are never confined to the coordinates of a single strike. When missiles rain down on a facility that powers homes, hospitals, and factories, the message is written in smoke for all to see. The conflict is no longer about battlefields alone, but about the very infrastructure that sustains life. In Yemen, where survival is already fragile, the symbolism of targeting a power station cannot be overstated. The roar of an engine silenced, the flicker of lights extinguished, the sudden plunge into darkness. These are not just physical effects, they are psychological markers of vulnerability. People do not merely witness a military strike, they experience a rupture in their sense of safety and continuity. This act also signals the reach of Israeli military power. By striking so close to the capital, it asserts a presence deep inside enemy-held territory, leaving little doubt about its ability to shape events far from its own borders. Yet for those on the ground, this demonstration of capability is indistinguishable from the shattering of their daily routines. Children woken by the blast may not understand the geopolitical chessboard, but they feel its tremors in their bones. Parents may not pass the strategic calculus, but they know their households will face another night without light, another morning of uncertainty. The world, watching from afar, often reduces such strikes to lines in a report, numbers on a chart, or footage replayed on loop. But for the residents of Sanaa, the strike on the Houthi power station is experienced as both an immediate terror and a foreboding sign. It is not just an attack on a facility. It is an assault on continuity, a reminder that in this conflict, the front line can shift without warning to the very heart of civilian life. For the people of Sanaa, the night of the strike unfolded not as a political headline, but as a lived catastrophe. In the moments after the explosions, families clutched each other in darkened rooms, listening to the hum of electricity fade into silence. The Aziz power plant, one of the few critical sources of energy in the capital, had been hit, and with it, the fragile rhythm of civilian life collapsed further. The power that once kept lights burning, machines operating, and water pumps running was gone in an instant. What follows such a strike is not only fear but a tangible shift in the conditions of survival as hospitals scramble to keep life, support machines running, schools struggle without power, and homes are forced into an indefinite blackout. In Yemen, where the humanitarian crisis is already among the worst in the world, the loss of electricity is not an inconvenience, it is a lifeline severed. A mother standing in the emergency ward of a hospital wonders if her child's incubator will keep working as backup generators cough and sputter. A father, already exhausted by food shortages, now faces the added burden of trying to preserve what little nourishment he has without refrigeration. For small business owners whose livelihoods depend on a steady flow of energy, the strike is another crushing setback in an economy already on its knees. Each blast that takes down infrastructure reverberates into countless households, multiplying suffering in ways no statistic can fully capture. The attack also embeds itself in memory. Children frightened by the sudden plunge into darkness may carry the echo of that fear long after the fires are extinguished. Ordinary citizens who have learned to live with the drone of conflict in the distance now face it in the immediacy of their neighborhoods. The strike forces them to reckon with a reality where even the basic necessities of life can be stripped away overnight. This is how war reaches beyond soldiers and militias. It reshapes the daily existence of the most vulnerable, embedding loss into every corner of society. For Sanaa, already a city marked by scarcity and uncertainty, the power plant strike is not an isolated event, but another reminder of how fragile the line between survival and collapse has become. In the aftermath of the strike, officials in Tel Aviv presented a clear justification. The Houthi power plant, they claimed, had been repurposed by the Houthis for military purposes. According to this narrative, what might appear to the outside world as civilian infrastructure was in fact part of a broader network, enabling missile launches and drone operations against Israeli territory. By this logic, the bombing was not only lawful but necessary, framed as an act of national defense rather than aggression. Each statement emphasized retaliation, portraying the strike as a direct response to repeated attacks that had targeted cities, ports, and key installations inside Israel over recent months. To the military establishment, the decision was not about symbolism but about deterrence, sending a message that continued assaults would incur a heavy price. This justification fits within a larger strategic pattern. Israeli officials argue that the Houthis, backed by Iran, are extending the conflict beyond Gaza and Lebanon, creating an arc of hostility stretching across the region. By striking in Yemen, Israel signals that it is prepared to confront threats wherever they emerge, refusing to allow geography to shield its adversaries. The argument suggests that the power plant was no longer a neutral facility, but a tool of warfare, and therefore a legitimate target under the rules of self-defense. From their perspective, failing to strike would invite further escalation, emboldening the Houthis to launch even more sophisticated attacks. Yet behind this reasoning lies a delicate balancing act. Justifying such actions requires convincing not only domestic audiences, but also international observers that the line between civilian and military has truly been crossed. The Houthis deny these claims, presenting the bombing as proof of indiscriminate aggression. Human rights groups warn that targeting critical infrastructure risks violating international law, particularly when the consequences for civilians are immediate and severe. The debate is not just about military necessity, but about legitimacy, about whether the logic of self-defense can be stretched to cover attacks that leave entire populations in the dark. For Israel's leaders, the justification is anchored in a sense of existential vulnerability. Each drone or missile launched from Yemen is viewed not as an isolated incident, but as part of a coordinated campaign to weaken national security. The bombing of the Houthi plant is thus defended as a preemptive strike, a calculated effort to dismantle the Houthis' ability to project power and to demonstrate that retaliation will reach far and strike hard. The question that lingers after the smoke clears is whether this was truly an act of defense or a dangerous escalation. On one hand, the justification seems straightforward. A nation under attack reserves the right to defend itself, to neutralize threats before they reach its borders. Missiles and drones launched from Yemen have not only disrupted Israeli skies, but have also threatened vital infrastructure and endangered civilian lives. By striking at what it claimed was a hub of hostile activity, the military argues it acted out of necessity, taking steps to protect its people from ongoing assaults. Seen from this angle, the strike on the power plant becomes part of a defensive strategy, a warning shot meant to deter further aggression and to demonstrate that no launch pad is safe from retaliation. On the other hand, the image of a burning power station in a city already ravaged by years of war cannot be divorced from the humanitarian consequences it brings. Civilian infrastructure, even when repurposed for military purposes, carries with it immense human costs when destroyed. Hospitals without power, homes plunged into darkness, and families deprived of basic necessities all reveal a harsher reality than the language of military necessity allows. For many observers, this does not look like defense, but like escalation, a step that deepens the cycle of violence, risks inflaming new fronts, and pushes the region closer to a broader conflict. The fact that the strike targeted not an armed convoy or weapons cache, but an energy facility underscores the fine line between security measures and collective punishment. This duality makes the strike difficult to categorize in absolute terms. Defense and escalation can coexist, each narrative valid depending on the lens through which one views the situation. For Israeli officials, it is a demonstration of resolve, proof that distant adversaries will face consequences for every missile launched. For Yemeni civilians and international critics, it is evidence of an expanding war that punishes the powerless more than the powerful. The moral dilemma is sharpened by the reality that what serves as a shield for one side can become a sword against the other, and that in the shifting dynamics of the Middle East, each retaliatory strike risks becoming the justification for the next round of attacks. The strike on the Houthi power plant did not occur in isolation. It must be understood as part of a steadily widening conflict that now spans multiple borders and draws in an ever-growing cast of actors. What began as confrontations tied to the war in Gaza has steadily evolved into a broader regional struggle where alliances, rivalries, and unresolved grievances converge. The extension of hostilities into Yemen illustrates how fragile the boundaries of this conflict have become, how quickly it can leap across geography and entangle nations that were once considered peripheral. By targeting infrastructure deep inside Houthi-controlled territory, Israel has effectively opened another front, linking the fighting in Gaza and southern Lebanon with the unrest in the Arabian Peninsula. This escalation is not without precedent. Over recent months, the Houthis have expanded their role, framing their attacks as part of a wider campaign of resistance against Israel. Their drones and missiles, though often intercepted, carry symbolic weight, proving that even distant actors can reach into Israeli airspace. In response, Israeli leaders have chosen to expand the battlefield, striking far beyond their immediate neighborhood. The danger in this approach lies in its ripple effects. Every action fuels another reaction. Every retaliation invites a countermeasure, and the circle of violence widens. As Yemen becomes another theater of confrontation, the chances of accidental escalation grow, with the potential to pull in regional powers like Iran more directly and to destabilize fragile ceasefires elsewhere. The involvement of Yemen also shifts the balance of pressure on global trade routes and energy supplies. The Red Sea, a vital artery for international shipping, has already seen disruptions from Houthi operations. A deepened Israeli-Houthi conflict risks intensifying these disruptions, affecting not only regional actors, but also economies far removed from the Middle East. What might appear as a targeted strike on a single facility thus carries global implications, intertwining local battles with international markets and politics. For the region itself, the strike underscores how interconnected the conflicts have become. Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, and now Yemen form a chain of flashpoints, each linked by a web of alliances and enmities that transcend borders. In such a climate, escalation in one theater almost inevitably reverberates in another, leaving little room for de-escalation. The attack near Sanaa is therefore more than a localized event. It is a marker of how dangerously close the Middle East is to sliding into a multi-front war. By striking so close to Sanaa, Israel delivered a calculated message not just to the Houthis, but to the entire region. The operation demonstrated that no distance can provide safety, that even facilities buried deep within hostile territory remain within reach of its military arsenal. It was an unmistakable display of capability, signaling to adversaries that geography will not shield them and that retaliation will not be confined to border skirmishes. This act of projecting power across such a vast distance underscores Israel's intent to maintain deterrence, to show that the cost of striking its territory will be exacted swiftly and decisively. For the Houthis, this was meant as a warning. Every drone launched, every missile fired will invite consequences that penetrate the very infrastructure on which their governance depends. Yet the warning resonates far beyond Yemen. Other groups and states aligned against Israel are also meant to take note. The message is that alliances with Iran, proxy warfare, and long-distance strikes cannot be waged without inviting devastating consequences. By hitting a power plant so close to the capital, Israel extends a lesson in deterrence not just to the Houthis but to Hezbollah, to militias in Syria, and to any actor considering testing its defenses. The operation was as much about perception as destruction, crafted to reassert military dominance in a region where multiple fronts are active at once. For Israel, the strike becomes part of a broader strategy of shaping the battlefield narrative. Rather than waiting for enemies to escalate, it seeks to seize initiative, projecting a readiness to act boldly and unpredictably. In this sense, the bombing is less about immediate tactical advantage than about the long-term psychology of deterrence. The goal is to instill hesitation in adversaries, to make them think twice before launching the next attack. By disrupting infrastructure at the core of Houthi-held territory, the strike underscores a willingness to target not just military stockpiles, but the systems that support them. At the same time, this message carries inherent risks. A demonstration of strength can be read as provocation, and a warning shot can just as easily trigger retaliation as it can deter it. In the volatile environment of the Middle East, where grievances and alliances overlap, A strike meant as a deterrent may instead become the spark that ignites further escalation. When a power plant is reduced to rubble, the greatest burden falls not on political leaders or military commanders, but on ordinary people who depend on electricity for the basic elements of survival. In Yemen, a country already shattered by years of conflict and economic collapse, the loss of power is devastating. Hospitals, many of which are already running on outdated equipment and short supplies, rely on a fragile chain of backup generators to keep essential machines functioning. Every cut in electricity puts patients at risk, from newborns in incubators to those dependent on dialysis or emergency surgeries. The blackout does not remain confined to medical facilities. It spreads through neighborhoods, leaving families without light, refrigeration, or access to clean water pumped from underground wells. The civilian cost extends beyond immediate discomfort. In a nation where hunger and disease are already rampant, the removal of power deepens an existing humanitarian catastrophe. Food spoils in homes and shops, undermining fragile food security in a society where malnutrition is widespread. Students attempting to continue their education face yet another obstacle, as schools cannot function effectively without electricity. Small businesses, from tailors to bakers, see their work grind to a halt, further weakening an economy already on the verge of collapse. Each destroyed generator sends ripples through daily life, compounding a crisis that stretches far beyond the initial blast. What makes this toll particularly heavy is that civilians have no control over the decisions driving these attacks. They are neither the ones launching drones nor the ones ordering retaliatory strikes, yet they endure the consequences of both. Each new strike reinforces the perception among many Yemenis that their lives are treated as collateral in a geopolitical contest far removed from their own struggles. The destruction of a power station, therefore, becomes more than an act of war. It is experienced as a reminder of vulnerability, a stripping away of the little stability they still hold on to. For Yemen's population, already living with shortages of food, medicine, and fuel, the attack magnifies despair. It demonstrates how fragile survival has become and how quickly it can be disrupted by decisions made elsewhere. In this sense, the strike is not only a military maneuver, but also a humanitarian blow, cutting into the core of civilian endurance and leaving thousands to face the aftermath in darkness. The broader question now confronting the international community is whether this strike will ultimately be remembered as a deterrent or as the trigger for a far more dangerous conflict. On one side of the debate lies the belief that decisive military action can re-establish boundaries, that by hitting targets deep inside hostile territory, Israel has drawn a red line the Houthis and their allies will hesitate to cross again. This interpretation views the bombing as a calculated effort to restore order through force, to demonstrate that each attack against Israeli territory carries with a cost so severe that it discourages repetition. Supporters of this view argue that history often rewards bold action, and that in regions where deterrence is constantly tested, strength is the only language that resonates. Yet the counter-argument is equally powerful. By striking a facility that underpins civilian life, Israel may have crossed into a realm where retaliation becomes not just possible, but inevitable. The Houthis, eager to prove resilience, could escalate their campaign of missile and drone strikes, seeking to demonstrate that they cannot be intimidated into silence. In such a scenario, the bombing of the power plant may be remembered less as a deterrent than as the catalyst for a spiral of attacks and counterattacks. Each side, convinced of the necessity of its actions, risks locking itself into a cycle that grows increasingly difficult to break. What begins as a single strike on a piece of infrastructure could expand into a broader confrontation that entangles multiple nations and destabilizes the region further. The uncertainty of how this moment will be remembered lies in the unpredictable nature of Middle Eastern politics, where alliances shift quickly and grievances run deep. Actions intended to project strength can be interpreted as acts of aggression, while moves meant to prevent escalation can sometimes ignite it. In this volatile context, the strike near Sanaa stands at a crossroads of interpretation. For some, it is the mark of a nation determined to secure its survival. For others, it is a provocation that risks setting the region on fire. The lasting judgment will depend not only on the immediate response of the Houthis, but also on whether regional actors choose to amplify the conflict or work to contain it. The strike on Sanaa's power plant is more than a clash between armies. It is a test of how far nations are willing to go in pursuit of security, and how much civilians must endure in the crossfire. Whether this moment becomes a deterrent or the spark of a wider war will depend not only on missiles and strategies, but on the choices leaders make in the days ahead.